Miles Morales' Spider-Man may not be as well known as Peter Parker's, well, because he's new, but with his own movies, comics, and now a video game, he's here to stay. Comic book expert and the entertainment editor of the online platform Critical Hit, Kervyn Cloete, joins us to tell us more. I always get your name wrong. We've known each other for so many years, and I always say Kervyn, and then he's like, Kervyn.
Kervyn.
So, Miles Morales, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about him and how he fits into the Spider-Man universe, and how can there be two Spider-Men when Peter Parker's already Spider-Man? Are they borrowing each other's clothes? What's happening?
So let's take it back to the beginning, like a little bit of a backstory. Back in the 90s, right, the comic book industry was on its last legs. American comic industry was falling apart. Marvel had declared bankruptcy and needed a way to get people in to read comics again. But I
can't imagine a time when Marvel would declare bankruptcy.
Yep, they did. That's how they ended up, unfortunately, with Spider-Man movie rights getting sold off to Sony, etc. But back to the comics. Basically, at the time, they needed to get new readers in, but they couldn't because new readers were afraid of the decades of backstory was coming on. So they decided to relaunch with new characters called imprint called the Ultimate Marvel. Ultimate Spider-Man was the first. It's still Peter Parker.
Let's have a little bit of him on screen. I want to see him. Oh, there we go.
It's still Peter Parker, it's Spider-Man, but now he was rebooted basically into a modern concept, was back in high school. That was a very successful one. In 2008, though, just as Barack Obama was about to be elected the first black president of America, one of the Marvel editors, Axel Alonso, decides this is the perfect opportunity to give a black Spider-Man to America. And he approaches comic writer Brian Michael Bendis, and they come up with Miles Morales.
Hugely successful comic writer.
And strangely enough, the actual look of Miles Morales is inspired by Donald Glover from Community, who at the time was trying to audition for the role in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. He loses it, but as a tribute, he goes in the show and dresses up in Spider-Man pajamas. Brian Michael Bendis sees it and goes, that's Miles Morales right there. And he bases Miles Morales of Donald Glover in the Spider-Man pajamas.
And fun fact for those of you who've seen Spider-Man Homecoming, Donald Glover is?
He plays Aaron Davis, which was Miles' uncle, Prowler.
So there's a little. So hopefully, there probably will be a Miles Morales live-action film, and Donald Glover is probably going to be the Prowler in that.
He probably will be, yeah. So Miles Morales, as I said, he's a bit unique. He's a half African American and Puerto Rican descent, and he replaced Peter Parker in the Ultimate Marvel universe when Peter Parker unfortunately passed away in a battle with the Green Goblin.
Spoilers.
10-year-old spoilers, who cares?
10-year-old spoilers. You haven't been reading comic books, you need to keep up. This is this is your history lesson. Continue,
Eventually,
teacher.
the Ultimate Universe, unfortunately, the sales went down and they decided to fold the Ultimate Universe into the mainstream Marvel universe called the 616 universe. Miles Morales was basically the only character that actually made the transition. He was that popular. Instead of just wiping him off, they found a way to bring him across. So currently, you have two Spider-Men in the Marvel Universe, both doing their thing with separate abilities. Peter Parker, you all know, he's got the proportionate strength of a spider and the reflex, everything. Miles has that as well, but now he can camouflage with his clothes.
I was going to ask this.
He's got the Venom blast. He can paralyze people with a little energy blast from his hands. So it makes him a little bit different to the normal Spider-Man.
So how did he become Spider-Man? Like, what happened?
So basically, he was inspired in the comic books itself. The Peter Parker at the time was actually unmasked, so everyone knew who Peter Parker was, and everyone saw this was actually just
Green Goblin. Hey, he's always up to that stuff.
He's like, everyone realized this was just this young kid that was fighting for us all the time. Miles saw this and he was inspired by Spider-Man. He had gained his powers he's also being bitten by a radioactive spider. It was a different spider from the same batch that infected Peter Parker. And he realized, without the Spider-Man, he's the perfect person. He's got the abilities, and he's going to take that place. And he became the Spider-Man, hugely popular character.
Okay, so every comic book needs a villain, right? So who are the big villains for Miles Morales? Of course, Doc Ock is one of the big villains for, and Green Goblin for Spider-Man, Peter Parker.
So in here we have Roxxon Corporation. They're basically this massive multi-billionaire conglomerate, and they're energy corporation. They're touching everything, but their experimentation into energy, where they favoring profits over anything safety, it's actually what kickstarts the story, as it affects Spider-Man really personally, one of his friends, and that kicks off the entire story for Miles Morales in here. And you have the Tinkerer. So the Tinkerer in the actual normal Spider-Man universe, and you've seen him in the movies actually, in Spider-Man Homecoming. Phineas Mason, he's the normal Tinkerer. He's just basically
who was he in Spider-Man Homecoming?
He creates all the weapons for Michael Keaton's Vulture.
Yes.
That's the Tinkerer.
Oh my word!
That's the Tinkerer. So he's generally, as you can see in the movie, he's this 40-year-old white guy, but they rebooted him here. Now he's a young girl again, and he's actually related to Spider-Man. He's one of her best friends growing up.
Okay, well, you need that kind of like soap opera drama as well inside.
Yeah, but it's nice that they did the same in the movie where they rebooted Dr. Octopus to be a woman in the movie, and it worked fantastically.
I actually want to talk a little bit about that movie because I actually feel that it's completely underrated. A lot of people have seen it.
It's the best Spider-Man movie ever made, in my opinion.
Okay, so it's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
And I think it quite accurately introduces us to what's happening. Just explain the multiverse a little bit.
So basically, in the multiverse itself, it's essentially just a collection of universes with different Spider-Men in different universes. In one, you have a Peter Parker who's an old guy. It's retired with a little bit of a poop there. I just saw that. That's fantastic. And then in the other Spider-Man, other universe, you have Gwen Stacy, who's one of Spider-Man's classmates. And that's with Spider-Verse. She was the one who became Spider-Man, or Spider-Woman, actually, in that case. And you have different kinds of Spider-Man. You have Nicolas Cage playing Spider-Man Noir, which is just all black and white. You have Spider-Man.
He was so good in that role.
Yeah,
I loved him so much.
I love how they're permanently in like grayscale, grey tone kind of thing. And you have
and Grumpy.
Yeah, and Grumpy, and a Spider-Ham even, which is basically he's actually not a person bitten by a pig. He's actually a spider that was bitten by a radioactive pig.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Spider-Ham.
So here's the thing. For a lot of people that are at home who are a little bit confused and going like, wow, you know what? Spider-Man is Peter Parker, and I refuse to accept that. Comic books are a luxury where we can rewrite that history over decades. And you see that with Batman. You see that with so many different comic book IPs that, that's kind of the tradition. And every new generation rewrites those heroes to tell the stories of the day and what's happening around us now. They are our parables that we like to use. And Miles Morales is the perfect example and the perfect evolution of Spider-Man. It doesn't mean that Peter Parker is irrelevant or it doesn't appear. He is still a huge part of the universe, which is really exciting. So it does incorporate what we know historically and the evolution of the character. So be prepared. You're going to be seeing a lot of Miles Morales going forward in Spider-Man movies, in Spider-Man comic books, which is super exciting. And hopefully we're going to be seeing a lot of that on this particular show. Kervyn, thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, guys, let us know what you think of Spider-Man, Miles Morales at home, on Facebook, at Expresso Show on Instagram and on Twitter. We'll see you guys on the other side.